Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of today's program, and I'm very grateful to Dr. Charles and Eurasia Research for including me. The topic I've chosen relates to language, teaching and assessment, so I hope that parts of it will be of interest to everyone. The title of the paper is English Medium Instruction, EMI, in the Humanities and Social Science, Over-Reliance on the Traditional Essay. I'll divide the talk into 4 sections. We'll begin by talking a little bit about the spread of EMI and some of its implications. Secondly, look at the essay and why it is so popular and has been popular for generations of students and faculty. Thirdly, whether we can learn something from genre-based approaches to education, which might in some way reduce our reliance on the traditional essay, and finally some implications for language teachers and content teachers who all contribute to the same programs. Now, EMI has been regarded as a global phenomenon. This is Julie Dearden's book, which was commissioned by the British Council. Dearden focuses on English in the following way. So the interest is in the global shift of English being taught as a foreign language to English being used as a medium of instruction for other academic subjects. And just to highlight the scale of EMI as a phenomenon, I'm going to take a definition of EMI from Ernesto Macaro, who is from Oxford University's Centre for Research and Development in EMI, a whole centre which is set up because the phenomenon has stimulated an enormous amount of interest and research. The definition: EMI, the use of the English language to teach academic subjects other than English itself in countries or jurisdictions in which the majority of the population's first language is not English. So that means that I'm going to be talking about EMI in Asia, but many of you are probably familiar with the spread of EMI, particularly in continental Europe. I'm based in Thailand, and just some statistics from about EMI there. What I put on the screen refer to international schools. So students aged 3 to 18, 205 international schools in the country. That has doubled in the last 10 years. More than half of the students attending are Thai students. And a separate topic of great interest is why the parents of those children decide to send them to international schools rather than to local schools. But in Bangkok alone, there are 118 schools, and these include the so-called, what are they called, the premium schools, big names like Rugby School, King's School, Regent. They're all represented. Now, when we look at who teaches in EMI institutions, and here I mean universities as well as schools, we have the content teachers who are experts in a particular subject. They're using English to teach their subject, and we have English teachers who are there to help with the students to cope with the English medium delivery. Now, do the content teachers pay attention to students' English language development? We know that in many cases they do. We have language across the curriculum, close collaboration between the content teacher and English experts, but in many schools, many universities, there's very little collaboration between the two types of teacher. Let's just ask ourselves a little bit about English teachers for a moment. What type of English language expertise do English teachers possess? Well, here we find an enormous range. I've identified, let's say, 4 groups of English teachers. The first are what we call the L1 English teachers, the teachers who taught who teach English to native English-speaking children, and they often would be the people who teach English literature A-level, and also language, assuming that the students are native speakers already. Now, the other groups are people who are specializing in teaching English to non-native speakers. We have what we often call the ESL teacher. They're teaching English as a second language, and usually looking at quite general aspects of the language, like perhaps teaching grammar, teaching pronunciation, things like that. Then we have what the international schools tend to call the EAL teacher, English as an additional language. And this group of teachers are meant to be supporting the main curriculum taught by other teachers. And then we have what we associate with university teaching, English for academic purpose teachers, who teach academic English, certainly teaching right up to the writing of a Ph.D. thesis and the oral defense of the thesis. Now, the EAP world, I think, has undergone an enormous change in the last 20 years, moving away. Well, we traditionally associate EAP with preparing students for an IELTS test. Nowadays, EAP teachers are looking at things like students' identity, how the student becomes a member of a discourse community, and having much closer collaboration with the subject teachers. Now, the EMI that we were referring to really targets these EAL teachers who are somewhere between the general ESL teacher and the highly specialized EAP teacher. So are they familiar with, and those of you who have backgrounds in Europe will probably be asking yourselves, where is CLIL? CLIL stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning, which has become the dominant approach to foreign language teaching in European countries. Now, we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's talk for a little bit about the essay, this document, this assessment, whatever we call it, which for generations has dominated the curriculum. Now, I am going to cast the essay in this talk in the role of a villain, which may have prevented learners, prevented teachers from considering perhaps other approaches that might help the students more with their English and their academic careers. In defense of the essay, what I'm going to quote from a university website in the UK. This is, I think, from a geography. It was published in a geography journal. Who writes essays, and why write essays? And the author offers 3 reasons. We're told that essay writing is an important part of studying for a degree for 3 reasons. Number 1, increases understanding, helps the process of learning because it pushes you, i.e. the student, amongst other things, to clarify and sort out ideas and information, analyze source materials, and exercise critical judgment. So this justification is expressed in terms of students' academic performance. Their academic learning will be enhanced through their experience of writing essays, and this obviously is what many people believe. Secondly, we're told that the essay develops writing skills, such as the ability to structure an argument, capacity to write lucidly, clearly, and persuasively. Well, certainly, if your students are writing essays every week, they're getting plenty of practice in writing, and that is obviously good for their writing ability. The third one tells us about the assessment that the tutors give you. Particularly the feedback on your progress will be very valuable. Now, we know, certainly from research in process writing, that student writing, getting feedback on it and writing again is enormously beneficial as is feedback in second language acquisition generally. Yeah, this was Journal of Geography in Higher Education Study Guide, but quite a recent one. So this is contemporary positions. Now, turning to the genre now, which genre should students be familiar with? Now, if we Google this, we get lots of agreement. Most people say the genre we need essay, indeed, where no one is saying forget the essay, but we're reminded that many students have to write reports, particularly lab reports. They may have to read and write case studies, reviews, particularly book reviews, reflective diary we're trying to make people more reflective, both teachers and learners, and the diary, going home and writing down, asking you to think about what you learned on the day, is very much part of reflective practice. So many students are required to write their reflections down. Posters, perhaps a relatively new academic text, now with poster presentations popular not only at conferences, but also in the teaching of subjects, that students will have to summarize something on a poster and defend it to the rest of the class. Research proposals now going on up to university level. The proposal as a document, the thesis itself, obviously at a very high level, is a document that needs to be written, and abstracts, which people probably read a lot before they actually have to write them. Journal articles. Well, we know that students will read journal articles, but now with the increasing popularity of Ph.D. by publication, many students, particularly in sciences, are encouraged to conduct an experiment, write it up in the form of a journal article and have it accepted for publication at a top journal. And then once you've got several journal articles, this can form the basis for your PhD submission. Now, leaving the genre aside, when we're thinking about what students should be writing and how we can help them, we should look at the functions, and these could be arranged in this way. One of the more basic functions will be just giving a description, learning how to describe something. It might be a piece of equipment, it might be something physical like a work of art. Summarizing is obviously something which children do a lot in their secondary schools, but they probably find it a very valuable skill in university also. Explanations, giving an explanation of how something works. It might be explaining a conceptual framework. It might be explaining how a piece of equipment works. Analysis, breaking things down into detail is an important skill which students have to learn. Comparisons, a more popular one that they start doing that, certainly in secondary education. Discussions, not only the discussion section of the thesis, but being able to talk and write in a discursive way about ideas will be part of something which needs to be learned. Recommendations, perhaps towards the end of a report or towards the end of the thesis. Persuasion, we know one of the great claims that the essay makes, that it is part of persuasive writing and persuading the reader to come round to your point of view. So I think it's helpful to keep the functions in mind when we choose the genre for reading or for reproduction. I'd just like to draw on some of the claims that are made by the genre-based pedagogy for saying how much more are students expected to learn when they adopt a genre-based approach. These are ideas from Ken Highland. There are about 7 of them. Explicit, that a genre-based approach makes clear what is to be learned. That means that the language is regarded the form of the work is as important as the content, and students learn how to talk about it. They learn probably some meta language to talk about structure and emphasis, registers, things like that. Systematic, because there's a framework which combines language with particular contexts. Needs-based, the genre-based approach starts with the learner's needs. We know that a lot of the genre which people learn to read and write when they're studying are very useful when they go into the workplace. Now, the same cannot be said for the essay. Supportive. Another claim is that this stuff is all very exciting, and it helps teachers to stimulate students' learning and creativity, particularly by exploring the boundaries between genre. And they certainly provide patterns of text which does, as they claim, put the students in control, because the student chooses the genre, they know what the language characteristics are of that genre, and then they feel that they're in charge. Critical, provides access to resources, challenges, valued discourses. Again, looking again at discourse boundaries. Consciousness raising. This is largely aimed at teachers. If English teachers become much more aware of genre, they will have a higher level of awareness of text. Their language awareness will improve, and they will also be able to appreciate more the challenges contained in those texts for their learners. So what I'm arguing for, or predicting in a sense, is that the EAL will move more towards EAP in the coming years. And I think we're seeing it happening already, but because the EMI spread so rapidly, many of the new schools sprang up, many of the universities introduced international colleges very quickly, without necessarily having anticipated some of the language difficulties that occurred. So these are some of the main strands of modern EAP. We would just go round from the top. Academic context, as we say, is now EAP is firmly relates to particular contexts. The older form of generic EAP is no longer as popular as subject-related EAP is, and something similar might happen in EAL. So disciplinary differences are observed because of teachers' familiarity with the way different disciplines communicate, particularly how they write about themselves. Academic discourses, obvious, students' needs, critical thinking, as every approach is claiming, but text processing and production. I think understanding more about how students compose and where the difficulties are will certainly improve the EAL teaching, and in syllabus development, how to create a syllabus rather than simply responding to the difficulties that students produce when they hand a piece of writing to a teacher. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there with that message, and I'd like to thank you all very much for attending today, and I wish you every success at today's conference. Thank you.